Should the Gospel of John really be called the Gospel of Lazarus? Most people know the fourth book in the New Testament as the Gospel according to John. But what if that title is wrong? We're going to look at three internal clues. 1. How the Gospel itself defines the disciple whom Jesus loved. 2. A rumor that this disciple would never die. And 3. The way he's linked to grave clothes and resurrection. Any one of these might be suggestive, but taken together they point not to John, son of Zebedee, but to Lazarus. Near the end of the fourth Gospel, we read, "This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true." Tradition has said for centuries, that's John, one of the 12. But if you step back and compare all four Gospels, something stands out. Mark, Matthew, and Luke never mention a disciple whom Jesus loved. In their accounts, no male disciple appears at the cross caring for Jesus' mother. No such beloved figure leans against Jesus at the Last Supper. No such disciple races Peter to the empty tomb. Then in the fourth Gospel, this new character suddenly appears. He's at the Last Supper, at the crucifixion, at the empty tomb, and in the closing resurrection scene. And he's presented as the one whose testimony undergirds the whole book. So the key question becomes, who is this disciple whom Jesus loved? The unnamed disciple actually is named. The only character in the fourth Gospel who's explicitly called the one Jesus loved by name is Lazarus. Let's look at the sequence. Lazarus first appears in John chapter 11. In verse 3, the sisters send a message. "Lord, the one you love is sick." Verse 5, the writer stresses, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus." Verse 36, onlookers seeing Jesus weep say, "See how he loved him." The text is hammering home the point. Lazarus is especially loved by Jesus. In the very next chapter, John 12, verses 1 to 2 and 9 to 11, Jesus comes to Bethany. They give a supper in his honor, and Lazarus, freshly raised from the dead, is reclining at the table with him. So the Gospel has now drawn a clear picture. There is a particular man, whom Jesus loves in a special way, and who reclines with him at a meal, right before the Passion narrative. Then, at the Last Supper, John 13, 23 to 25 says, "One of his disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, was reclining next to him. No name is given here, but we've just been shown a man called the one you love in 11, verse 3, emphasizes loved in chapter 11:5 and 11:36, reclining at a meal with Jesus in 12, 1 to 2. The most natural reading is that the same beloved figure has carried forward into chapter 13. The Gospel doesn't need to repeat his name. It expects you to remember who the beloved one is, Lazarus. Now look at an intriguing note at the end of the book. In John 21, Peter sees the beloved disciple and asks, "Lord, what about this man?" Jesus answers, "If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You must follow me." Then the narrator explains, because of this, the rumor spread among the believers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, "If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you?" Why would early Christians even entertain the idea that this specific disciple might never die? If the beloved disciple is simply John, son of Zebedee, there's nothing in the story itself that would generate that kind of rumor. But if the beloved disciple is Lazarus, the story looks very different. I mean, this is the one man in the Gospel who's already died and been brought back to life. So it's easy to imagine people puzzled and asking, does this mean he can't really die dead since he's already been dead and come back to life? Will he remain here until Jesus returns? John 21 seems to be addressing exactly that kind of speculation. There was a rumor that this beloved disciple would never die. That rumor makes excellent sense if the beloved disciple is Lazarus, the previously dead man now walking around. It fits him perfectly. It doesn't particularly fit John, son of Zebedee. Another key connection between Lazarus and the beloved disciple is the relationship to grave clothes. At Lazarus' tomb, we're told, Jesus cries out, "Lazarus, come out." Lazarus emerges bound hand and foot with grave wrappings. His face is wrapped with a sudarion, or a face cloth. Then at Jesus' tomb, in John 20, Peter goes in and sees the linen cloths lying there, and the sudarion that has been on Jesus' head is folded up by itself. Then the other disciple, the beloved disciple, goes in. He saw and believed, we're told, in chapter 20, verse 8. The parallel is striking. In both stories, there's a tomb. The specific mention of wrappings and a face cloth. Now ask, why is the beloved disciple the one who saw and believed as soon as he noticed the grave clothes? If that disciple is Lazarus, the answer is obvious. He has personally experienced being in a tomb. He has personally been wrapped and then released. When he sees Jesus' grave clothes left behind, he recognizes the significance of it in a way that no one else can. Once again, the beloved disciple's role fits Lazarus exceptionally well. So why do we call it the Gospel according to John? So far, we've stayed inside the text. The only explicitly named beloved disciple is Lazarus. The rumor about never dying fits Lazarus' story perfectly. The recognition at the tomb, based on grave clothes, makes deep sense if the beloved disciple has personally walked out of a tomb before. From an internal narrative point of view, Lazarus fits the role of the beloved disciple better than John, son of Zebedee. So where does the traditional title, according to John, come from? That's where the later church tradition enters the picture. The gospel itself never says, "I, John, wrote this." Instead, it simply speaks of the disciple whom Jesus loved, and this is the disciple who testifies to these things. The first writer we know of who explicitly identifies this beloved disciple with John is Irenaeus of Lyon, around 180 of the Common Era, over a century after the time of Jesus. In his Against Heresies, which is preserved in Eusebius' church history, Irenaeus says, "John, the disciple of the Lord, who also leaned back on his breast, himself also published a gospel while he was living at Ephesus in Asia." He takes the beloved disciple, the one who leans on Jesus' breast in John 13, and just acquaints him with John, son of Zebedee. After Irenaeus, the name sticks. So the traditional chain looks like this. 1. The gospel itself names the disciple whom Jesus loved. 2. In the late 2nd century, Irenaeus and others decide that this must be John, son of Zebedee. 3. Scribes begin to copy the gospel with the title according to John. 4. That title becomes standard, is inherited by later Bibles. So if you were titling this gospel solely on its own internal clues, its chosen witness figure, and the way its theology is framed through that witness, you probably wouldn't call it the Gospel according to John. You'd be more accurate to call it the Gospel according to Lazarus. Now, reread this book through Lazarus' eyes, as a story of Jesus told from the perspective of the man whom Jesus loved, the man who had himself been called out of a tomb. Let that perspective sit in the back of your mind as you move from Bethany to the upper room, to the cross, to the empty tomb. Watch how often the story makes the most sense if the voice behind it belongs not to John, but to Lazarus.